I recently hit the 1-year anniversary owning my 2015 Alfa Romeo 4C, and I'd like to share with you my experiences throughout that first year of ownership. Before I do that though, let me give you a little bit of background.
As I was reviewing the footage captured for this video, I realized that I had more than enough for a single video, and because my viewers tend to not like super long videos, I'm going to break it up into at least 2 different videos. So this one is going to focus on the origin story of me finding and purchasing my 2015 Alfa Romeo 4C, as well as a little bit of history on my bucket list of cars that I'd like to own one day. I think it's a pretty interesting story, and I hope you enjoy it.
So I have a long bucket list of cars that I would like to own one day. And a couple years ago, I was able to negotiate with my wife to be able to have 2 such cars. So for a long time, I had a 4-door sedan because we had 3 kids, and it was sort of a secondary car. And then I had a second car for myself, which was a Lotus Elise. But I always had to have that other car as a family car. And I really didn't want to part with the Lotus Elise. I love that car. So I was finally at a point where our kids each had their own vehicles. And my wife agreed to let me get a less practical car as my second car. And so I started working my way down my bucket list. And I started simple with some smaller cars like a 2012 Mini Cooper S, a Tesla Model S, which I bought from a volleyball buddy of mine. And then that Tesla Model S got into an accident. I was rear-ended and it was pretty serious damage. I was able to get it all repaired. It was all covered by insurance, but that kind of, made me a little squeamish about hanging onto that car for very much longer. So I sold that car, and that put me in position to be looking for another car. And I started actually looking at Porsches because although Alfa Romeo 4Cs have been on my list since they were first introduced, I've never been able to see one in person. I've never been able to sit in one, touch one, drive one. And so while it's on my list, I didn't have the ability to just say, yes, I'm going to buy this car and perhaps buy it online, from somewhere else in the country. So I was looking at Porsches, and I'm not a very knowledgeable Porsche guy, and I was getting overwhelmed, quite frankly. I mean, there are so many different Porsche models and configurations, and it is hard for me to differentiate. And so I was going back and forth, and honestly, I mean, my eyes were getting crossed as I was trying to figure this out. And I thought, okay, let me just take a break and I'll do a quick search and see if there are any Alfa Romeo 4Cs here locally for sale. And lo and behold, there was one that just got listed right up the street here at the Carolina Exotic Cars dealership. And so I went ahead and made an appointment for the very next day, went there, took a look at it, test drove it, loved it. I knew at that point that it was a joy to drive and that I could get in and out of it comfortably. That was important to me, make sure that I could use it as a regular daily driver because, those are the cars that I use primarily. So I had to make sure that it was going to work for me, and it did. So then I talked to the guy at the dealership and tried to haggle with him, but they were asking too much, quite frankly. Where the market was at that point in time, they were asking, I think it was 63, and I had seen cars online with similar mileage and similar condition for considerably less than that. So I did attempt to negotiate him down. He did go down a little bit, but still not to where I thought I had the best deal possible. And because I have this arrangement with my wife where I can have 2 of these, what she considers toy cars, completely unnecessary cars, totally impractical cars, I can't lose a lot of money on each transaction. And so far to date, as I've bought and sold cars on my bucket list, I've either broken even or made a small profit. So that has made it easier for me to continue with my habit. So at any rate, since I knew that I could drive the car comfortably and I would enjoy owning it, I started looking online because I've bought and sold cars online before, so I was pretty comfortable with that process. And I found a couple cars that looked like good prospects. The way I'm working through my bucket list, so as I mentioned, I have this 2008 Lotus Elise that I love, and I didn't really imagine that I would part with it anytime soon, but trying to keep an open mind. That said, when I'm looking for these cars, I'm not looking for my dream car, right? So I'm not looking for the dream Mini Cooper S because I'm going to sell it in less than a year and I don't want to lose my shirt. So I'm really more interested in the deal than the color of the car and some of the options and specs. So it was the same deal for the Alfa Romeo 4C. So I went looking around trying to find cars that would fit my criteria, and mainly the biggest problem I had was finding ones that did not have some sort of damage or salvage title. But I did find a couple. I decided to go with one I found up in Maryland. And it was a really tricky situation because the cars were moving quickly. This was during the lockdowns and people were paying premiums and the 4Cs were very highly sought after cars. So I tried calling this dealership time and time again. It actually was a Porsche dealership. And first I couldn't even get through, then I tried email, then I tried, leaving a message for their billing department, and finally a salesperson called me back. And it turned out that they had just listed the car, but all the other salespeople were on vacation for the week for some reason. One of them was on their honeymoon, another one was just off for the week. So it was just this one guy holding down the fort, and he was busy doing new deliveries to Porsche customers. So didn't have a lot of time to work on the Alfa Romeo 4C. So I was like, okay, well, send me some pictures, let me know what the deal is. And it seemed like a good deal. It was, I think, $53,000, but it did look like it had some paint damage. I figured if I got a good enough deal that I would be able to put some money into it to repair any defects that it might have. And compared to other cars, I mean, that was almost $10,000 cheaper than the one here locally, and similar miles, same year, just not quite as good condition. So I went ahead and, with much perseverance, was finally able to get some paperwork from the salesperson up at the Porsche dealership, because I wanted something in writing, right, that said that they accepted my offer and that he wasn't going to sell it to somebody else who just showed up on his doorstep. So he gave me his word, we got the paperwork done, and I flew up to that dealership in Maryland from Raleigh and went through the paperwork, got the car, and drove it home. The drive home was also an adventure because I was leaving from their dealership, which is north of Washington, D.C., and normally going around Washington, D.C. is just an absolute nightmare of traffic. I was lucky because it was some sort of obscure government holiday, and so the traffic wasn't horrible. So I made okay time, traffic wasn't horrible, but I'm driving home, it's late at night, it's pitch black out, and as I was trying to change lanes, going probably 75 miles per hour, I ran over a deer carcass, and it was fresh. It was, sometimes you see them and they're kind of flat and, torn up or something like that. It was a big old hump. So I drove over that sucker going 75 miles an hour, and I was like, oh my God, no, I've destroyed this car, I've caused some kind of damage. So I pulled over as quickly as I could at the next rest area and was looking around trying to see if I'd actually damaged anything. Honestly, I was looking for some grisly stuff too, like chunks of deer meat or anything like that stuck in the grill. I didn't find anything. And evidently the car did fine. So somehow I was able to drive up and over that deer carcass. I don't know how, because the 4C doesn't have a lot of clearance in the front, but somehow I avoided damaging the car. So anyhow, brought it home and everything was hunky-dory. So then I found a detailer who could deal with the paint imperfections. I actually tried to find a couple, talking to some of the high-end dealerships here in the area, and got different opinions. I ended up going with someone that a friend recommended, another volleyball friend, incidentally, and he did a great job. It wasn't cheap because what initially looked like maybe some paint specks in the clear coat, it ended up that they went all the way down to the primer layer. And I'll be honest, we kind of puzzled over what caused this damage. The appearance was in sort of a splatter mark from front to back. So such as you would see if you were driving on a muddy, wet day, right? And you got some dirty water or mud splashed up on your car as you're driving highway speeds. So it was following that pattern from the front bumper over the hood and down one side of the car. And obviously it wasn't mud. I'm guessing that it was some sort of a caustic material because it is in that splash pattern, but it really, ate deeply into the finish. And so at any rate, my body guy was able to repair it. We decided to take off 3 panels and completely strip and repaint them. And they look great. Perfect match. He had the official matching colors, so there's no issue there. And I got my car back, and it looks gorgeous. And so that began my year with my 2015 Alfa Romeo 4C.
Thanks for watching part 1 of my first year with my Alfa Romeo 4C. I hope you'll stay tuned for part 2, where I'll go over the good and the bad, mostly good, as well as talk about some of the fun I've had with the car. Now, I hope you'll enjoy this musical montage. I think it expresses my addiction for this car.